This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is a recording by Steve Anderson of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 40. 3 Years Later. When I broke the back of knight-errantry that time, I no longer felt obliged to work in secret. So the very next day I exposed my hidden schools, my mines, and my vast system of clandestine factories and workshops to an astonished world. That is to say, I exposed the 19th century to the inspection of the 6th. Well, it is always a good plan to follow up an advantage promptly. The knights were temporarily down, but if I would keep them so, I must simply paralyze them. Nothing short of that would answer. You see, I was bluffing that last time in the field. It would be natural for them to work around to that conclusion if I gave them the chance. So I must not give them time, and I didn't. I renewed my challenge, and engraved it on brass, posted it up where any priest could read it to them, and also kept it standing in the advertising columns of the paper. I not only renewed it, but added to its proportions. I said, name the day, and I would take 50 assistants and stand up against the massed chivalry of the whole earth and destroy it. I was not bluffing this time. I meant what I said. I could do what I promised. There wasn't any way to misunderstand the language of that challenge. Even the dullest of the chivalry perceived that this was a plain case of put up or shut up. They were wise and did the latter. In all the next 3 years they gave me no trouble worth mentioning. Consider the 3 years sped. Now look around on England. A happy and prosperous country, and strangely altered. Schools everywhere, and several colleges, a number of pretty good newspapers, even authorship was taking a start. Sir Dinadan the humorist was first in the field, with a volume of gray-headed jokes which I had been familiar with during 13 centuries. If he had left out that old rancid one about the lecturer, I wouldn't have said anything. But I couldn't stand that one. I suppressed the book and hanged the author. Slavery was dead and gone. All men were equal before the law. Taxation had been equalized. The telegraph, telephone, the phonograph, the typewriter, the sewing machine, and all the 1,000 willing and handy servants of steam and electricity were working their way into favor. We had a steamboat or two on the Thames. We had steam warships, and the beginnings of a steam commercial marine. I was getting ready to send out an expedition to discover America. We were building several lines of railway, and our line from Camelot to London was already finished and in operation. I was shrewd enough to make all offices connected with the passenger service places of high and distinguished honor. My idea was to attract the chivalry and nobility, and make them useful and keep them out of mischief. The plan worked very well. The competition for the places was hot. The conductor of the 433 Express was a duke. There wasn't a passenger conductor on the line below the degree of earl. They were good men, every one, but they had 2 defects which I couldn't cure, and so had to wink at. They wouldn't lay aside their armor, and they would knock down fare. I mean rob the company. There was hardly a knight in all the land who wasn't in some useful employment. They were going from end to end of the country in all manner of useful missionary capacities. Their penchant for wandering, and their experience in it, made them altogether the most effective spreaders of civilization we had. They went clothed in steel, and equipped with sword and lance and battle axe, and if they couldn't persuade a person to try a sewing machine on the installment plan, or a melodeon, or a barbed wire fence, or a prohibition journal, or any of the other 1,001 things they canvassed for. They removed him and passed on. I was very happy. Things were working steadily toward a secretly longed for point. You see, I had two schemes in my head which were the vastest of all my projects. The one was to overthrow the Catholic Church and set up the Protestant faith on its ruins. Not as an established church, but as a go-as-you-please one. And the other project was to get a decree issued by and by, commanding that upon Arthur's death unlimited suffrage should be introduced and given to men and women alike, at any rate to all men, wise or unwise, and to all mothers who at middle age should be found to know nearly as much as their sons at 21. Arthur was good for 30 years yet, he being about my own age, that is to say 40, and I believe that in that time I could easily have the active part of the population of that day ready and eager for an event which should be the first of its kind in the history of the world: a rounded and complete governmental revolution without bloodshed, the result to be a republic. Well, I may as well confess, though I do feel ashamed when I think of it, I was beginning to have a base hankering to be its first president myself. Yes, there was more or less human nature in me. I found that out. Clarence was with me as concerned the revolution, but in a modified way. His idea was a republic, without privileged orders, but with a hereditary royal family at the head of it instead of an elective chief magistrate. He believed that no nation that had ever known the joy of worshiping a royal family could ever be robbed of it and not fade away and die of melancholy. I urged that kings were dangerous. He said, then have cats. He was sure that a royal family of cats would answer every purpose. They would be as useful as any other royal family. They would know as much. They would have the same virtues and the same treacheries, the same disposition to get up shindies with other royal cats. They would be laughably vain and absurd and never know it. They would be wholly inexpensive. Finally, they would have as sound a divine right as any other royal house, and Tom the Seventh, or Tom the 11th, or Tom the 14th, by the grace of God King, would sound as well as it would when applied to the ordinary royal tomcat with tights on. As a rule, said he, in his neat modern English, the character of these cats would be considerably above the character of the average king, and this would be an immense moral advantage to the nation, for the reason that a nation always models its morals after its monarch. The worship of royalty being founded in unreason, these graceful and harmless cats would easily become as sacred as any other royalties, and indeed more so, because it would presently be noticed that they hanged nobody, beheaded nobody, imprisoned nobody, inflicted no cruelties or injustices of any sort, and so must be worthy of a deeper love and reverence than the customary human being, and would certainly get it. The eyes of the whole harried world would be fixed upon this humane and gentle system, and royal butchers would presently begin to despair. Their subjects would fill the vacancies with catlings from our own royal house. We should become a factory. We should supply the thrones of the world. Within 40 years all Europe would be governed by cats, and we should furnish the cats. The reign of universal peace would begin then, and end no more forever. Meow, wow, wow. Hang him, I supposed he was in earnest, and was beginning to be persuaded by him until he exploded with that cat howl and started me almost out of my clothes. But he never could be in earnest. He didn't know what it was. He had pictured a distinct and perfectly rational and feasible improvement upon constitutional monarchy, but he was too feather headed to know it, or care anything about it either. I was going to give him a scolding, but Sandy came flying in at that moment with wild terror, and so choked with sobs for a minute that she could not get her voice. I ran and took her in my arms, and lavished caresses upon her, and said beseechingly: "Speak, darling, speak! What is it?" Her head fell limp upon my bosom, and she gasped almost inaudibly: "Hello Central!" "Quick!" I shouted to Clarence. "Telephone the king's homeopath to come." In 2 minutes I was kneeling by the child's crib, and Sandy was dispatching servants here, there, and everywhere, all over the palace. I took in the situation almost at a glance. Membranous croup. I bent down and whispered: "Wake up, sweetheart. Hello Central." She opened her soft eyes languidly, and made out to say, "Papa." That was a comfort. She was far from dead yet. I sent for preparations of sulphur. I rousted out the croup kettle myself, for I don't sit and wait for doctors when Sandy or the child is sick. I knew how to nurse both of them, and had had experience. This little chap had lived in my arms a good part of its small life, and often I could soothe away its troubles and get it to laugh through the tear dews on its eyelashes when even its mother couldn't. Sir Launcelot, in his richest armor, came striding along the great hall now on his way to the stock-board. He was the president of the stock-board, and occupied the Siege Perilous, which he had bought of Sir Galahad; for the stock-board consisted of the knights of the Round Table, and they used the Round Table for business purposes now. Seats at it were worth, well, you would never believe the figure, so it's no use to state it. Sir Launcelot was a bear, and he had put up a corner in one of the new lines, and was just getting ready to squeeze the shorts to day. But what of that? He was the same old Launcelot, and when he glanced in as he was passing the door and found out that his pet was sick, that was enough for him. Bulls and bears might fight it out their own way, for all him. He would come right in here and stand by little Hello Central for all he was worth. And that was what he did. He shied his helmet into the corner, and in half a minute he had a new wick in the alcohol lamp and was firing up on the croup kettle. By this time Sandy had built a blanket canopy over the crib, and everything was ready. Sir Launcelot got up steam. He and I loaded up the kettle with unslacked lime and carbolic acid, with a touch of lactic acid added thereto, then filled the thing up with water and inserted the steam spout under the canopy. Everything was ship-shape now, and we sat down on either side of the crib to stand our watch. Sandy was so grateful and so comforted that she charged a couple of churchwardens with willow bark and sumac tobacco for us, and told us to smoke as much as we pleased. It couldn't get under the canopy, and she was used to smoke, being the first lady in the land who had ever seen a cloud blown. Well, there couldn't be a more contented or comfortable sight than Sir Launcelot in his noble armor, sitting in gracious serenity at the end of a yard of snowy churchwarden. He was a beautiful man, a lovely man, and was just intended to make a wife and children happy, but of course Guenever. However, it's no use to cry over what's done and can't be helped. Well, he stood watch and watch with me, right straight through, for 3 days and nights, till the child was out of danger. Then he took her up in his great arms and kissed her, with his plumes falling about her golden head. Then he laid her softly in Sandy's lap again, and took his stately way down the vast hall, between the ranks of admiring men-at-arms and menials, and so disappeared. And no instinct warned me that I should never look upon him again in this world. Lord, what a world of heartbreak it is! The doctor said we must take the child away if we would coax her back to health and strength again, and she must have sea air. So we took a man of war and a suite of 260 persons, and went cruising about, and after a fortnight of this we stepped ashore on the French coast, and the doctors thought it would be a good idea to make something of a stay there. The little king of that region offered us his hospitalities, and we were glad to accept. If he had had as many conveniences as he lacked, we should have been plenty comfortable enough. Even as it was, we made out very well, in his queer old castle, by the help of comforts and luxuries from the ship. At the end of a month I sent the vessel home for fresh supplies and for news. We expected to hear back in 3 or 4 days. She would bring me, along with other news, the result of a certain experiment which I had been starting. It was a project of mine to replace the tournament with something which might furnish an escape for the extra steam of the chivalry, keep those bucks entertained and out of mischief, and at the same time preserve the best thing in them, which was their hardy spirit of emulation. I had had a choice band of them in private training for some time, and the date was now arriving for their first public effort. This experiment was baseball. In order to give the thing vogue from the start, and place it out of the reach of criticism, I chose my nines by rank, not capacity. There wasn't a knight in either team who wasn't a sceptered sovereign. As for material of this sort, there was a glut of it always around Arthur. You couldn't throw a brick in any direction and not cripple a king. Of course, I couldn't get these people to leave off their armor. They wouldn't do that when they bathed. They consented to differentiate the armor so that a body could tell one team from the other, but that was the most they would do. So one of the teams wore chain mail ulsters, and the other wore plate armor made of my new Bessemer steel. Their practice in the field was the most fantastic thing I ever saw. Being ball-proof, they never skipped out of the way, but stood still and took the result. When a Bessemer was at the bat and a ball hit him, it would bound 150 yards sometimes; and when a man was running and threw himself on his stomach to slide to his base, it was like an ironclad coming into port. At first I appointed men of no rank to act as umpires, but I had to discontinue that. These people were no easier to please than other nines. The umpire's first decision was usually his last. They broke him in two with a bat, and his friends toted him home on a shutter. When it was noticed that no umpire ever survived a game, umpiring got to be unpopular. So I was obliged to appoint somebody whose rank and lofty position under the government would protect him. Here are the names of the nines: the Bessemers: King Arthur, King Lot of Lothian, King of Northgalis, King Marcel, King of Little Britain, King Labor, King Pellam of Listingese, King Bagdemagus, King Ptolemy Lephentis. The Ulsters: Emperor Lucius, King Logris, King Marhalt of Ireland, King Morganor, King Mark of Cornwall, King Nentrus of Garlot, King Melodus of Lyons, King of the Lake, and the Sodan of Syria. The umpire, Clarence. The first public game would certainly draw 50,000 people, and for solid fun would be worth going around the world to see. Everything would be favorable. It was balmy and beautiful spring weather now, and nature was all tailored out in her new clothes. End of chapter 40. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is a recording by Steve Anderson of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 41. The Interdict. However, my attention was suddenly snatched from such matters. Our child began to lose ground again, and we had to go sitting up with her. Her case became so serious. We couldn't bear to allow anybody to help in this service, so we two stood watch and watch, day in and day out. Oh, Sandy, what a right heart she had! How simple and genuine and good she was! She was a flawless wife and mother, and yet I had married her for no other particular reasons except that by the customs of chivalry she was my property until some knight should win her from me in the field. She had hunted Britain over for me, had found me at the hanging bout outside of London, and had straightway resumed her old place at my side in the placidest way and as of right. I was a New Englander, and in my opinion this sort of partnership would compromise her, sooner or later. She couldn't see how, but I cut argument short, and we had a wedding. Now I didn't know I was drawing a prize, yet that was what I did draw. Within the 12-month I became her worshipper, and ours was the dearest and perfectest comradeship that ever was. People talk about beautiful friendships between two persons of the same sex. What is the best of that sort, as compared with the friendship of man and wife, where the best impulses and highest ideals of both are the same? There is no place for comparison between the two friendships. The one is earthly, the other divine. In my dreams, along at first, I still wandered 13 centuries away, and my unsatisfied spirit went calling and harking all up and down the unreplying vacancies of a vanished world. Many a time Sandy heard that imploring cry come from my lips in my sleep. With a grand magnanimity she saddled that cry of mine upon our child, conceiving it to be the name of some lost darling of mine. It touched me to tears, and it also nearly knocked me off my feet, too, when she smiled up in my face for an earnest reward, and played her quaint and pretty surprise on me. The name of one who is dear to thee is here preserved, here made holy, and the music of it will abide alway in our ears. Now thou'lt kiss me, as knowing the name I have given the child. But I didn't know it, all the same. I hadn't an idea in the world, but it would have been cruel to confess it and spoil her pretty game. So I never let on, but said: "Yes, I know, sweetheart, how dear and good it is of you, too, but I want to hear these lips of yours, which are also mine, utter it first, then its music will be perfect." Pleased to the marrow, she murmured: "Hello, Central." I didn't laugh. I am always thankful for that. But the strain ruptured every cartilage in me, and for weeks afterward I could hear my bones clack when I walked. She never found out her mistake. The first time she heard that form of salute used at the telephone she was surprised and not pleased, but I told her I had given order for it, and that henceforth and forever the telephone must always be invoked with that reverent formality, in perpetual honor and remembrance of my lost friend and her small namesake. This was not true, but it answered. Well, during 2 weeks and a half we watched by the crib, and in our deep solicitude we were unconscious of any world outside that sick room. Then our reward came. The center of the universe turned the corner and began to mend. Grateful? It isn't the term. There isn't any term for it. You know that yourself, if you've watched your child through the valley of the shadow, and seen it come back to life and sweep night out of the earth with one all illuminating smile that you could cover with your hand. Why, we were back in this world in one instant. Then we looked the same startled thought into each other's eyes at the same moment. More than 2 weeks gone, and that ship not back yet! In another minute I appeared in the presence of my train. I had been steeped in troubled bodings all this time; their faces showed it. I called an escort, and we galloped 5 miles to a hilltop overlooking the sea. Where was my great commerce that so lately had made these glistening expanses populous and beautiful with its white winged flocks? Vanished, every one. Not a sail from verge to verge, not a smoke bank, just a dead and empty solitude, in place of all that brisk and breezy life. I went swiftly back, saying not a word to anybody. I told Sandy this ghastly news. We could imagine no explanation that would begin to explain. Had there been an invasion? An earthquake? A pestilence? Had the nation been swept out of existence? But guessing was profitless. I must go, at once. I borrowed the king's navy, a ship no bigger than a steam launch, and was soon ready. The parting. Ah, yes, that was hard. As I was devouring the child with last kisses, it brisked up and jabbered out its vocabulary. The first time in more than 2 weeks, and it made fools of us for joy. The darling mispronunciations of childhood. Dear me, there is no music that can touch it, and how one grieves when it wastes away and dissolves into correctness, knowing it will never visit his bereaved ear again. Well, how good it was to be able to carry that gracious memory away with me. I approached England the next morning, with the wide highway of salt water all to myself. There were ships in the harbor at Dover, but they were naked as to sails, and there was no sign of life about them. It was Sunday, yet at Canterbury the streets were empty. Strangest of all, there was not even a priest in sight, and no stroke of a bell fell upon my ear. The mournfulness of death was everywhere. I couldn't understand it. At last, in the further edge of that town I saw a small funeral procession, just a family and a few friends following a coffin, no priest. A funeral without bell, book, or candle. There was a church there, close at hand, but they passed it by weeping, and did not enter it. I glanced up at the belfry, and there hung the bell, shrouded in black, and its tongue tied back. Now I knew. Now I understood the stupendous calamity that had overtaken England. Invasion? Invasion is a triviality to it. It was the interdict. I asked no questions. I didn't need to ask any. The church had struck. The thing for me to do was to get into a disguise and go warily. One of my servants gave me a suit of clothes, and when we were safe beyond the town I put them on, and from that time I traveled alone. I could not risk the embarrassment of company. A miserable journey. A desolate silence everywhere, even in London itself. The traffic had ceased. Men did not talk or laugh or go in groups, or even in couples. They moved aimlessly about, each man by himself with his head down, and woe and terror at his heart. The Tower showed recent war scars. Verily, much had been happening. Of course I meant to take the train for Camelot. Train! Why, the station was as vacant as a cavern. I moved on. The journey of Camelot was a repetition of what I had already seen. The Monday and the Tuesday differed in no way from the Sunday. I arrived far in the night. From being the best electric-lighted town in the kingdom, and the most like a recumbent sun of anything you ever saw, it was become simply a blot upon darkness. That is to say, it was darker and solider than the rest of the darkness, and so you could see it a little better. It made me feel as if maybe it was symbolical, a sort of sign that the church was going to keep the upper hand now, and snuff out all my beautiful civilization just like that. I found no life stirring in the somber streets. I groped my way with a heavy heart. The vast castle loomed black upon the hilltop, not a spark visible about it. The drawbridge was down, the great gate stood wide. I entered without challenge, my own heels making the only sound I heard, and it was sepulchral enough in those huge vacant courts. End of chapter 41. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is a recording by Steve Anderson of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 42 War. I found Clarence alone in his quarters, drowned in melancholy, and in place of the electric light he had reinstituted the ancient grag lamp, and sat there in a grisly twilight with all curtains drawn tight. He sprang up and rushed for me eagerly, saying, "Oh, it's worth 1,000,000,000 milrays to look upon a live person again." He knew me as easily as if I hadn't been disguised at all, which frightened me. One may easily believe that. "Quick now, tell me everything of this fearful disaster," I said. "How did it come about?" "Well, if there hadn't been any Queen Guenever, it wouldn't have come so early, but it would have come anyway. It would have come on your own account by and by. By luck it happened to come on the queen's." "And Sir Launcelot's?" "Just so. Give me the details." "I reckon you will grant that during some years there has been only one pair of eyes in these kingdoms that has not been looking steadily askance at the queen and Sir Launcelot." "Yes, King Arthur's." "And only one heart that was without suspicion." "Yes, the king's. A heart that isn't capable of thinking evil of a friend." "Well, the king might have gone on, still happy and unsuspecting, to the end of his days, but for one of your modern improvements, the stock board. When you left, 3 miles of the London, Canterbury, and Dover were ready for the rails, and also ready and ripe for manipulation in the stock market. It was wildcat, and everybody knew it. The stock was for sale at a give away. What does Sir Launcelot do but yes, I know, he quietly picked up nearly all of it for a song. Then he bought about twice as much more, deliverable upon call, and he was about to call when I left." "Very well, he did call. The boys couldn't deliver. Oh, he had them, and he just settled his grip and squeezed them. They were laughing in their sleeves over their smartness in selling stock to him at 15 and 16 and along there that wasn't worth 10. Well, when they had laughed long enough on that side of their mouths, they rested up that side by shifting the laugh to the other side. Now it was when they compromised with the Invincible at 283. Good land! He skinned them alive, and they deserved it. Anyway, the whole kingdom rejoiced. Well, among the flayed were Sir Agravaine and Sir Mordred, nephews to the king. End of the first act. The second act, scene first, an apartment in Carlisle Castle, where the court had gone for a few days' hunting. Persons present, the whole tribe of the king's nephews. Mordred and Agravaine proposed to call the guileless Arthur's attention to Guenever and Sir Launcelot. Sir Gawaine and Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris will have nothing to do with it. A dispute ensues, with loud talk; in the midst of it enter the king. Mordred and Agravaine sprang their devastating tale upon him. Tableau. A trap is laid for Launcelot by the king's command, and Sir Launcelot walks into it. He made it sufficiently uncomfortable for the ambushed witnesses, to wit, Mordred, Agravaine, and 12 knights of lesser rank, for he killed every one of them but Mordred. But of course that couldn't straighten matters between Launcelot and the king, and didn't. Oh dear, only one thing could result, I see that: war, and the knights of the realm divided into a king's party and a Sir Launcelot's party. Yes, that was the way of it. The king sent the queen to the stake, proposing to purify her with fire. Launcelot and his knights rescued her, and in doing it slew certain good old friends of yours and mine, in fact some of the best we ever had, to wit, Sir Bellas de Orgulés, Sir Sagwardus, Sir Griflet le Filet de Lou, Sir Brandiles, Sir Argleval, Oh, you tear out my heartstrings. Wait, I'm not done yet. Sir Tor, Sir Gauter, Sir Gillimer, the very best man in my subordinate nine. What a handy right fielder he was. Sir Reynolds' three brothers, Sir Damus, Sir Priamus, Sir Kay, the stranger. My peerless shortstop, I've seen him catch a daisy cutter in his teeth. Come, I can't stand this. Sir Driant, Sir Lambegus, Sir Hemedine, Sir Petelope, Sir Paramons, and whom do you think? Rush, go on. Sir Gareth and Sir Gareth both. Oh, incredible! Their love for Launcelot was indestructible. Well, it was an accident. They were simply onlookers. They were unarmed, and were merely there to witness the queen's punishment. Sir Launcelot smote down whoever came in the way of his blind fury, and he killed these without noticing who they were. Here is an instantaneous photograph one of our boys got of the battle. It's for sale on every newsstand. There, the figures nearest the queen are Sir Launcelot with his sword up, and Sir Gareth gasping his last breath. You can catch the agony in the queen's face through the curling smoke. It's a rattling battle picture. Indeed it is. We must take good care of it. Its historical value is incalculable. Go on. Well, the rest of the tale is just war, pure and simple. Launcelot retreated to his own town and castle of Joyous Gard, and gathered there a great following of knights. The king, with a great host, went there, and there was desperate fighting during several days, and as a result all the plain around was paved with corpses and cast iron. Then the church patched up a peace between Arthur and Launcelot, and the queen and everybody but Sir Gawaine. He was bitter about the slaying of his brothers, Gareth and Gareth, and would not be appeased. He notified Launcelot to get him thence, and make swift preparation, and look to be soon attacked. So Launcelot sailed to his duchy of Gawaine with his following, and Gawaine soon followed with an army, and he beguiled Arthur to go with him. Arthur left the kingdom in Sir Mordred's hands until you should return. Ah, a king's customary wisdom. Yes, Sir Mordred set himself at once to work to make his kingship permanent. He was going to marry Guenever as a first move, but she fled and shut herself up in the Tower of London. Mordred attacked. The Bishop of Canterbury dropped down on him with the interdict. The king returned. Mordred fought him at Dover, at Canterbury, and again at Barham Down. Then there was talk of peace and a composition. Terms: Mordred to have Cornwall and Kent during Arthur's life, and the whole kingdom afterward. Well, upon my word, my dream of a republic to be a dream, and so remain. Yes, the two armies lay near Salisbury. Gawaine's head is at Dover Castle. He fell in the fight there. Gawaine appeared to Arthur in a dream, at least his ghost did, and warned him to refrain from conflict for a month, let the delay cost what it might. But battle was precipitated by an accident. Arthur had given order that if a sword was raised during the consultation over the proposed treaty with Mordred, sound the trumpet and fall on, for he had no confidence in Mordred. Mordred had given a similar order to his people. Well, by and by an adder bit a knight's heel. The knight forgot all about the order, and made a slash at the adder with his sword. Inside half a minute those two prodigious hosts came together with a crash. They butchered away all day. Then the king, however— we have started something fresh since you left. Our paper has— No, what is that? War correspondence. Why, that's good. Yes, the paper was booming right along, for the interdict made no impression, it got no grip while the war lasted. I had war correspondence with both armies. I will finish that battle by reading you what one of the boys says. Then the king looked about him, and then was he ware of all his host and of all his good knights were left no more on live but two knights, that was Sir Lucan de Butlere and his brother Sir Belvedere, and they were full sore wounded. Jesu mercy, said the king, where are all my noble knights becomen? Alas, that ever I should see this doleful day. For now, said Arthur, I am come to mine end. But would to God that I wist where were that traitor Sir Mordred that hath caused all this mischief. Then was King Arthur where Sir Mordred leaned upon his sword among a great heap of dead men. Now give me my spear, said Arthur unto Sir Lucan, for yonder I have espied the traitor that all this woe hath wrought. Sir, let him be, said Sir Lucan, for he is unhappy, and if ye pass this unhappy day ye shall be right well revenged upon him. Good lord, remember ye of your night's dream, and what the spirit of Sir Gawaine told you this night. Yet God of his great goodness hath preserved you hitherto. Therefore for God's sake, my lord, leave off by this, for blessed be God ye have won the field, for here we be three on live, and with Sir Mordred is none on live. And if ye leave off now, this wicked day of destiny is past. Tide me death, betide me life, saith the king. Now I see him yonder alone, he shall never escape mine hands, for at a better avail shall I never have him. God speed you well, said Sir Belvedere. The king gat his spear in both his hands, and ran toward Sir Mordred, crying, Traitor, now is thy death day come. And when Sir Mordred heard Sir Arthur, he ran until him with his sword drawn in his hand. And then King Arthur smote Sir Mordred under the shield, with a foin of his spear through the body more than a fathom. And when Sir Mordred felt that he had his death's wound, he thrust himself with the might that he had up to the butt of King Arthur's spear. And right so he smote his father Arthur with his sword holden in both his hands on the side of the head, that the sword pierced the helmet of the brain pan, and therewithal Sir Mordred fell stark dead to the earth, and the noble Arthur fell in swoon to the earth, and there he swooned oft times. That is a good piece of war correspondence, Clarence. You are a first-rate newspaper man. Well, is the king all right? Did he get well? Poor soul, no. He is dead. I was utterly stunned. It had not seemed to me that any wound could be mortal to him. And the queen, Clarence? She is a nun, at Almesbury. What changes! And in such a short while! It is inconceivable. What next, I wonder? I can tell you what next. Well? Stake our lives and stand by them. What do you mean by that? The Church is master now. The interdict included you with Mordred. It is not to be removed while you remain alive. The clans are gathering. The Church has gathered all the knights that are left alive, and as soon as you are discovered we shall have business on our hands. Stuff! With our deadly scientific war material, with our hosts of trained— Save your breath. We haven't 60 faithful left. What are you saying? Our schools, our colleges, our vast workshops, our— When those knights come, those establishments will empty themselves and go over to the enemy. Did you think you had educated the superstition out of those people? I certainly did think it. Well, then, you may unthink it. They stood every strain easily, until the interdict. Since then they merely put on a bold outside. At heart they are quaking. Make up your mind to it. When the armies come, the mask will fall. It's hard news. We are lost. They will turn our own science against us. No, they won't. Why? Because I and a handful of the faithful have blocked that game. I'll tell you what I've done. and what moved me to it. Smart as you are, the Church was smarter. It was the Church that sent you cruising, through her servants, the doctors." "Clarence!" "It is the truth. I know it. Every officer of your ship was the Church's picked servant, and so was every man of the crew." "Oh, come!" "It is just as I tell you. I did not find out about these things at once, but I found them out finally. Did you send me verbal information, by the commander of the ship, to the effect that upon his return to you, with supplies, you were going to leave Cadiz?" "Cadiz? I haven't been at Cadiz at all." "Going to leave Cadiz and cruise in distant seas indefinitely, for the health of your family? Did you send me that word?" "Of course not. I would have written, wouldn't I?" "Naturally. I was troubled and suspicious. When the commander sailed again, I managed to ship a spy with him. I have never heard of vessel or spy since. I gave myself 2 weeks to hear from you in, then I resolved to send a ship to Cadiz. There was a reason why I didn't." "What was that?" "Our navy had suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. Also, as suddenly and as mysteriously, the railway and telegraph and telephone service ceased. The men all deserted. Poles were cut down. The Church laid a ban upon the electric light. I had to be up and doing, and straight off. Your life was safe. Nobody in these kingdoms but Merlin would venture to touch such a magician as you without 10,000 men at his back. I had nothing to think of but how to put preparations in the best trim against your coming. I felt safe myself; nobody would be anxious to touch a pet of yours. So this is what I did. From our various works I selected all the men boys, I mean whose faithfulness under whatsoever pressure I could swear to, and I called them together secretly and gave them their instructions. There are 52 of them, none younger than 14, and none above 17 years old." "Why did you select boys?" "Because all the others were born in an atmosphere of superstition, and reared in it. It is in their blood and bones. We imagined we had educated it out of them; they thought so, too. The interdict woke them up like a thunderclap. It revealed them to themselves, and it revealed them to me, too. With boys it was different. Such as have been under our training from 7 to 10 years have had no acquaintance with the Church's terrors, and it was among these that I found my 52. As a next move, I paid a private visit to that old cave of Merlin's; not the small one, the big one. Yes, the one where we secretly established our first great electric plant when I was projecting a miracle. Just so. And as that miracle hadn't become necessary then, I thought it might be a good idea to utilize the plant now. I've provisioned the cave for a siege." "A good idea. A first-rate idea." "I think so. I placed 4 of my boys there as a guard, inside and out of sight. Nobody was to be hurt, well outside. But any attempt to enter well, we said just let anybody try it. Then I went out into the hills and uncovered and cut the secret wires which connected your bedroom with the wires that go to the dynamite deposits under all our vast factories, mills, workshops, magazines, etc. And about midnight I and my boys turned out and connected that wire with the cave, and nobody but you and I suspects where the other end of it goes to. We laid it underground, of course, and it was all finished in a couple of hours or so. We sha'n't have to leave our fortress now when we want to blow up our civilization." "It was the right move, and a natural one. Military necessity, in the changed condition of things. Well, what changes have come! We expected to be besieged in the palace some time or other, but however, go on." "Next we built a wire fence." "Wire fence?" "Yes, you dropped the hint of it yourself 2 or 3 years ago." "Oh, I remember the time the Church tried her strength against us the first time, and presently thought it was wise to wait for a hopefuler season. Well, how have you arranged the fence?" "I start 12 immensely strong wires, naked, not insulated, from a big dynamo in the cave. Dynamo with no brushes except a positive and a negative one." "Yes, that's right." The wires go out from the cave and fence in a circle of level ground 100 yards in diameter. They make 12 independent fences, 10 feet apart, that is to say, 12 circles within circles, and their ends come together in the cave again. Right, go on. The fences are fastened to heavy oaken posts only 3 feet apart, and these posts are sunk 5 feet in the ground. That is good and strong. Yes, the wires have no ground connection outside of the cave. They go out from the positive brush of the dynamo. There is a ground connection through the negative brush. The other ends of the wire return to the cave, and each is grounded independently. No, no, that won't do. Why? It's too expensive. Uses up force for nothing. You don't want any ground connection except for the one through the negative brush. The other end of every wire must be brought back into the cave and fastened independently, and without any ground connection. Now then, observe the economy of it. A cavalry charge hurls itself against the fence. You're using no power. You're spending no money, for there is only one ground connection till those horses come against the wire. The moment they touch it, they form a connection with the negative brush, through the ground, and drop dead. Don't you see? You're using no energy until it is needed. Your lightning is there and ready, like the load in a gun, but it isn't costing you a cent till you touch it off. Oh, yes, the single ground connection. Of course. I don't know how I overlooked that. It's not only cheaper, but it's more effectual than the other way, for if wires break or get tangled, no harm is done. No, especially if we have a telltale in the cave and disconnect the broken wire. Well, go on. The Gatlings? Yes, that's arranged. In the center, in the inner circle, on a spacious platform 6 feet high, I have grouped a battery of 13 Gatling guns, and provided plenty of ammunition. That's it. They command every approach, and when the church's knights arrive, there's going to be music. The brow of the precipice over the cave? I've got a wire fence there, and a Gatling. They won't drop any rocks down on us. Well, and the glass cylinder dynamite torpedoes? That's attended to. It's the prettiest garden that was ever planted. It's a belt 40 feet wide, and goes around the outer fence. Distance between it and the fence, 100 yards. Kind of neutral ground, that space is. There isn't a single square yard of that whole belt but is equipped with a torpedo. We laid them on the surface of the ground and sprinkled a layer of sand over them. It's an innocent-looking garden, but you let a man start in to hoe it once, and you'll see. You tested the torpedoes? Well, I was going to, but what? Why, it's an immense oversight not to apply a test. Yes, I know, but they're all right. I laid a few in the public road beyond our lines, and they've been tested. Oh, that alters the case. Who did it? A church committee. How kind. Yes, they came to command us to make submission. You see, they didn't really come to test the torpedoes. That was merely an incident. Did the committees make a report? Yes, they made one. You could have heard it a mile. Unanimous? That was the nature of it. After that, I put up some signs, for the protection of future committees, and we have had no intruders since. Clarence, you've done a world of work, and done it perfectly. We had plenty of time for it. There wasn't any occasion for hurry. We sat silent a while, thinking. Then my mind was made up, and I said, yes, everything is ready. Everything is ship-shape. No detail is wanting. I know what to do now. So do I. Sit down and wait. No, sir. Rise up and strike. Do you mean it? Yes, indeed. The defensive isn't my line, and the offensive is. That is, when I hold a fair hand. 2/3 as good a hand as the enemy. Oh, yes, we'll rise up and strike. That's our game. 100 to 1, you're right. When does the performance begin? Now. We'll proclaim the Republic. Well, that will precipitate things, sure enough. It will make them buzz, I tell you. England will be a hornet's nest before noon tomorrow, if the church's hand hasn't lost its cunning, and we know it hasn't. Now you write, and I'll dictate thus: Proclamation. Be it known unto all, whereas the king having died and left no heir, it becomes my duty to continue the executive authority vested in me, until a government shall have been created and set in motion. The monarchy has lapsed. It no longer exists. By consequence, all political power has reverted to its original source, the people of the nation. With the monarchy, its several adjuncts died also. Therefore, there is no longer a nobility, no longer a privileged class, no longer an established church. All men are become exactly equal. They are upon one common level, and religion is free. A republic is hereby proclaimed, as being the natural estate of a nation when other authority has ceased. It is the duty of the British people to meet together immediately, and by their votes elect representatives and deliver into their hands the government. I signed it "The Boss," and dated it from Merlin's cave. Clarence said: "Why, that tells where we are, and invites them to call right away." That's the idea. We strike by the proclamation. Then it's their innings. Now, have the thing set up and printed and posted right off. That is, give the order. Then, if you've got a couple of bicycles handy at the foot of the hill, ho for Merlin's cave. I shall be ready in 10 minutes. What a cyclone there is going to be tomorrow when this piece of paper gets to work. It's a pleasant old palace, this is. I wonder if we shall ever again. But never mind about that. End of chapter 42.